Western music is divided into four eras. From earliest to latest, they are Baroque, Classical, Romantic, and Modern. Today we will look at the modern era, or the 20th century. As the name implies, this covers the years from 1900 through 1999. The 20th century was replete with multiple wars and revolutions, including 2 world wars, along with the rise and fall of many dictators and countries themselves. In addition, the technological developments took us from the age of horse and buggy through the space age and well into the information age. The ability to communicate quickly across the globe poured so many different ideas into the creativity pot that a generalized style cannot be described. This is true of the art, fashion, and music of the century. Art saw many radical changes across the globe. A few of the many movements and developments are Cubism, which represented people, objects, and ideas using different angles. Surrealism, primarily made up of strange paintings with a dreamlike quality. And pop art. Artists in the pop art movement felt that art had become too abstract for the average audience and sought to make their art more accessible. You can see that these are 3 distinct styles, all created within the 20th century. Modernist architecture is less diverse than modern art, fashion, or music. As the result of technological advances in construction materials, the designers were able to move away from load-bearing walls. The outer walls could then be filled with glass, allowing in more natural light and a greater sense of space. Buildings were often raised on pillars, and many had flat roofs to allow for gardens or additional living space. Fashions of the 20th century changed significantly from decade to decade. Cross-cultural and historical influences exerted a profound impact upon fashion, as improved travel and communications enabled continents to be crossed with ease. This created a worldwide market rather than being limited to a country or culture. Previous eras of music had widespread styles and conventions that most composers followed, creating a particular sound to the music of the time. You may recall that in the earliest era of Western music, known as the Baroque period, art, architecture, and fashions were dramatic, elaborate, and highly ornamented. The Classical era was academic, graceful, and simple, while Romantics emphasized emotion over reason, freedom of form, and an emphasis on nature. Composers of the 20th century began to reject these conventions and branched out into many different genres, creating new and often radically different music. As a result of this, there is no unified sound to modern music. Today, we will briefly touch on just 5 of the modern music genres. Keep in mind that there are many more. Impressionism arose in the late 19th to the early 20th century. Like the art of the same period, the music is meant to communicate a general mood or idea rather than specifics. Lines are blurred and non-specific. Impressionism is defined by an ambiguous tonality, which means that the sense of key is uncertain, and unusual scales to create a more sensuous, lighter mood, as opposed to the heavy and serious mood of late Romantic composers like Wagner. Claude Debussy is one of the leading composers of the Impressionist genre. Listen to a small portion of Debussy's Clair de la Lune, And notice, rather than distinguishing a home note, there is more of a sense of a wandering of the notes. Atonalism is a rather dissonant sounding music that dispenses with traditional harmonic function and lacks a key center. Arnold Schoenberg was the pioneer of this genre in the 1920s. Listen to an example of atonalism from Schoenberg's Suite for Piano, Opus 25. Jazz, which is arguably the biggest musical development of the 20th century, was created by African Americans. This marks the first time that the USA was contributing to classical music. Jazz music can be distinguished by its swing or syncopated rhythms. Its characteristic harmonics are created by the use of extended chords like ninths and thirteenths, or augmented and diminished chords. The practice of chord substitution, in which players spontaneously insert a chord during a performance to replace the one suggested by the composer, also helped to define the distinct sound of jazz. Many American composers were a part of this art form, including George Gershwin. Enjoy this section of his famous piece, I've Got Rhythm. Starting in the 1960s, the minimalist school focused on using minimal musical material and making use of repetitive patterns, loops, and electronic techniques, reflecting the technological advances of the day. This music was generally more consonant sounding and less challenging for the average listener than other genres like atonalism. Composers like Philip Glass became incredibly popular. Here is a portion of Philip Glass's Glassworks. You could hear that he had both lots of repetition and imitation. As the 20th century continued, people came up with various inventive ways of challenging the very meaning of composition. For example, having a portion of the music freely improvised by the performer without a chord base, or playing the sections of a piece in a different order at each performance. There was also an increase in unusual ways to play an instrument, for example, by plucking the strings on the piano or tapping the fallboard. A classic example of this is John Cage's 4 minutes 33 seconds, in which the performers do nothing except be present for 4 minutes and 33 seconds, meaning that the piece is actually composed of the sounds and atmosphere in the environment. Here is 39 seconds of 4 minutes 33 seconds. The composer about which we will learn more today is Sergei Prokofiev. He was born in Russia, in what is now the Ukraine. During the Russian Revolution in 1917, he fled the chaos of Russia and toured Europe and America, performing his avant-garde compositions. When he returned to Russia under Stalin, he was deemed too non-traditional and forced to write music of which the government would approve.